Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Slam, the podcast that reviews every single DC superhero ever created. I'm your co-host Mike-EL, and as always I'm joined by
Joshua Murr-VELL, and today we're going to be taking a look at not necessarily origins of Batman, but a couple of issues that are connected in a different way.
Yes,
that will kind of show you the character throughout the years.
Yes, absolutely. And we're joined by Adam-Antium. Thanks for joining us, Adam.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. And thank you for letting me on this adventure with this Birdman, I guess we're talking about.
That's right. Birdman. Everyone knows Birdman. No, this is Batman. And the reason we were reviewing this issue... Now, speaking of origins, there are many origins to the Slam podcast, okay? Many inspirations. And one of them, I got to say, is probably Detective Comics number 627, because that came out in the 50th anniversary of Batman during Batmania of 1989. And in that issue, they reprinted Detective Comics 27, the first Batman story, called The Case of the Chemical Syndicate. And then they reprinted a 60s story with the same plot, with just a few elements that were changed, as well as Robin added to the story. And then they commissioned two new versions of that story, one by Marv, Wolfman, and Jim Aparo, one by Alan Grant and Norm Breyfogle. And as a kid, I thought, this is a fascinating idea. And I don't think I'd ever seen it done before or since. And so, how many years later? 34 years later, Slam was created because of the inspiration of this comic. And we kind of got the idea, if you follow the same story through different decades, it's a really cool way to see how the style of a character or of a comic book style can evolve over time. And so we're going to start off with Detective Comics 27, which we've never reviewed before because it doesn't feature the origin of Batman. This is Batman's first case, or first publicized case, I guess you could say. So we open up in this issue. Do you have the cover there by any chance, Josh?
No, I don't actually.
Oh, darn it. Okay, well, guess what? That's okay because I'm going to drop it into the chat. But guess what? Any Bat fan knows the cover of Detective 27. It's one of the most famous covers ever made. And even though I don't think Bob Kane is particularly a great artist, I think this cover is actually really good.
It's certainly iconic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, it's very recognizable. Like you can't mistake it for anything else. It's saying one of a kind maybe is the wrong word because it's been kind of like duplicated and
imitated.
Yeah, imitated it quite a bit, but yeah, it's a great cover.
I think the thing is I think if you look at the buildings, the way that they frame Batman against the negative space of the sky, which is yellow, which is very cool. I think it's actually really well done. I don't know. And then you have the two guys looking at Batman, which draws your eye to Batman. You have the red hat, you have the blue hat. You have the way that what is it called? The thing he swings on, whatever it's called.
Grappling hook, yeah.
Yeah, the way it kind of dangles down. Even like in the background, the one pipe on the building points up to Batman. It's just a really nice design. Adam, what do you think?
Well, I agree. It's iconic. And, I'll say this. Maybe it's just fatigue from seeing this image replicated so much. I don't want to say it's passe. I mean, it's no action comics, with Superman. With that, I think that says more about who Superman is. You get this great idea. You get the mysticism about it. Here, it's like, it's a Batman. And we have to write that it's a Batman on the cover, so you know what he is.
Right.
Okay.
But I think the lineage that Batman would have thereafter ties in with what makes this cover so iconic. I will say, you mentioned the yellow background. I am kind of a fan of that when it comes to 4-color comics and having those gradations of it. I think the very cartoony yellow mixed with this darker shaded character does make him pop out and be a lot more distinct. I do like that visual element quite a bit.
Right.
Although, just in case you didn't know, this comic was called Detective Comics because the banner takes up like a third of the cover.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, those were different times for sure. Also, I didn't realize how big the word comics is. Like detective is slightly smaller than comics. So I think that's pretty cool. But anyway, okay, so that's enough about this cover. Now we're going to jump into the issue. Now, again, we are technically reading. Oh, we're reading a digital scan of Detective 627, not the original. So the colors we're seeing are slightly altered. Now, again, we should point out that in the past 10, 20 years, it's been kind of hip to show Batman in the early days of his career wearing purple gloves, right? Because it's so cool. But this was during the period whenever they'd reprint this story, they would just correct his gloves to be blue, right?
Right.
Because that's the classic costume, the blue. So anyway, okay, so let's see what we got here. So there's a couple elements I've got to point out because they're important. Bruce Wayne is with his friend, Commissioner Gordon. That relationship is not usually exploited too much in other media, I find, or even in later stories. So I think that's a pretty cool thing to establish them in the very first panel as being friends. I think it's really cool, and it'll come back later. You'll see why that's important. But so basically, the Commissioner Gordon gets a call, and because Bruce Wayne's got nothing better to do, he decides to come with them, right, to come to the scene of this crime. They find a dead body. Now, the story does get a little bit complicated, but basically, there's a dead body. There's a guy who's accused of murdering this person, and he claims he didn't do it. Commissioner Gordon then asks him to tell him what happened. It turns out the guy claims that he came home and found the dead body, a guy with a knife in his back. A safe was open. Something was stolen, right?
Right.
And
So
this guy,
some documents, and
Right.
this is his son.
yes, this is the guy's son.
yeah.
He's like, why would I kill my father? And so then right at that same time, a guy named Steve Crane calls, and I love this little detail here. When the voice is coming through on the phone, instead of seeing a little zigzag speech balloon, we see a thought bubble, which confused me at first when I was reading this. I'm like, what's happening here? But anyway, yeah, that's just the guy talking to the line. So then the guy into the line is like, what does he say? He's like, oh yeah, he's like, yeah, the guy who died yesterday, he called and he said there was threats on his life, and today I received the same. So then Commissioner Gordon's like, oh, interesting. So then and then Bruce Wayne's like, oh yeah, by the way, I got somewhere to be. I'm gonna go home. So he leaves. Then meanwhile, we cut back to Steve Crane, the guy who was just on the phone. And this is kind of poor storytelling because I would have liked to have seen a shot of Steve Crane's face before he gets murdered. But now we're cutting back to his apartment or his house, and now he's getting murdered by someone who then escapes out of the window here. And then, this is where it gets really cool. Now the guy's trying to escape. He meets up with another guy, and the guy's like, did you get the paper? He's like, yeah. All of a sudden, they go to the roof, and look who's on the roof. It's the Batman with a hyphen. Now, we should point out that because they know who he is, obviously that means this is not Batman's first case, right? But anyway, Batman looking very cool. The two details I got to point out, that in the original story, his gloves were purple. The other thing is the way that the wings were drawn looks more like bat wings, which I think is a very...
I like it.
Yeah. I really wish that artists would stick with that,
I really do love how the cape goes over his shoulders in the front more too.
Yeah.
Kind of like a bat, like wrapping its wings around itself to hide and to sleep.
Yes.
I love
the way
that
they do that. Yes,
and
I totally agree.
It also adds almost like a Dracula kind of look to him, which kind of builds on to like the fear side of him.
Agree.
I love that. Yeah, I will say I don't love his ears in this version of Batman. I don't know. It's the one thing I don't like as much about this costume.
We should say yes, the ears are much lower on his skull, but there's a connection here to another character. When Wolverine was created, he was first drawn by Herb Trimpe. He was designed by John Romita Sr. and drawn by Herb Trimpe. He originally had little pointy things above his eyes and whiskers on his face. But when Gil Kane drew the cover to Giant Size X-Men #1, he accidentally drew the whole face to be black. And it was a mistake, but someone said, no, leave it. He looks like the old Batman. It looks cool. And that's, if you look at this version of Batman, that's basically like Wolverine's mask, but without the definition between the mask and the skull cap, you could say. It's all just one
Yeah.
shape, you know?
It's like an elongated domino mask. Just because
Right.
the entire cowl is dark, you don't really see that sort of separation. Um, I think I'm in the minority. I actually kind of like this because, as you said, with the cape, it makes him look more bat-like. This too looks more like the appendages coming off a bat's skull, its ears. I actually think that's kind of cool. And I think it makes him look a little bit more bestial. You know, he's not quite human, which is
Right.
always, I think, the best Batman when he's somewhat obscured, somewhat made mythological. I'm not opposed to the side ears. That's a hot take, I know, but yeah.
No, I'm kind of with you. Like, in a way, it's almost like his costume became more like itself and less like a bat over the years. Like, the pointy ears are not really bat ears, they're Batman ears. The colors are not bat colors, they're Batman colors, right? But in this first appearance, he's definitely more bat-like, which is cool, more rodent-like. But anyway, so back to the story. So then Batman beats up these bad guys. He grabs the piece of paper. He jumps into his red car, which is not a Batmobile yet. It's just a red roadster. And as he reads the paper, the narration points out the Batman reads the paper he snatched from the killers, and a grim smile comes to his lips. So he's found out something that we don't know about yet, which is cool. So then we cut back over to a different guy. So this guy is informed of one of the deaths. He's like, "Hello, Jennings. I must see Mr. Stryker quickly." And then he lets him in. But then as soon as the guy comes in, this is Rogers. He gets hit over the head and then tied up by this guy. And and then instead of just shooting him, he lowers like a glass kind of like dome over top of him, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm sure you'll die eventually. See you later." And he just leaves him. So he leaves, but then at that moment, the Batman jumps down from like a skylight or a whatever sunroof, and runs. I love the scene. He runs, and he just as the thing is coming down, and he's inside the thing with him now, and he uses a wrench to smash through the glass and free himself and the guy, which I think is really cool.
Mhm.
And then he beats up the bad guy, and he beats up what is this, a goon? Oh no, it's Jennings. He beats up Jennings, yeah. And then Alfred Stryker comes back and sees Rogers. He's like, "Rogers, what happened? Your assistant Jennings tried to kill me." And then he's like, "So he didn't get you after all. Well, I'll finish you off then." So then this guy's trying to kill him. So he takes out his knife, but then Batman stops his hand. And then he explains what's going on. "This rat was behind the murders. You see, I learned that you, Lampert, Crane, and Stryker were once partners in the Apex Chemical Corporation. Stryker, who wished to be sole owner, was having no ready cash, made secret contracts for you to pay a certain sum of money. But he figured by killing you and stealing the contracts, he would have to pay this money. He wouldn't have to pay this money. So then now he's fighting with the guy. The guy pulls a gun. Batman socks him, and then the goon falls back. And this is a key line. He falls into a vat of chemicals, and then Batman says, "A fitting end for his kind." So the guy's dead, and Batman's happy about it. So then Batman disappears out of the skylight. Then we cut back over to Bruce Wayne reconvening with Commissioner Gordon, and he's like. And he's explaining to Bruce Wayne, he's like, "And then Rogers said the Batman went through the skylight." Huh, a very lovely fairy tale, Commissioner, indeed. Then Bruce Wayne leaves, and Commissioner Gordon's like, "Bruce Wayne is a nice young chap, but he certainly must lead a boring life. Seems disinterested in everything." Now here's the big twist ending, guys. Are you ready for this? At home, Bruce Wayne goes through a door, and when he comes back out, Bruce Wayne is Batman. Isn't that cool? But anyway, hey,
spoilers, everyone.
You didn't know that, right? So yeah, there's the case of the Chemical Syndicate. And before we move forward, let's just talk about the story. Adam, what did you think of the story and art in this one?
I think this is so unique because there's so many tropes, so many touchstones about whose Batman is, what his character is. He won't kill anyone. He's this dark, hulking figure. He's this vigilante with no sense of humor. And here he's like cracking jokes. He outright murks a person. And I also love this touch too, because there's been a lot of criticism, unrightful, I feel, because the 60s era Batman is its own thing. People need to appreciate it for what it is. It's a facet of the character. But a lot of individuals have gone on to say, "Oh, the 60s really ruined Batman. It made it
Mhm.
campy. It made it just a child's book. Batman started out as a darker, grittier character. There's also a thing, like in the 66 Batman show, where a villain is slowly descending a trap upon somebody to kill them. I mean, it has its
Mhm.
roots in the very first comic Batman ever appeared in.
Yep.
I like that full circle. One thing about the story I do want to highlight that I really enjoy, there's never been a lot of discrepancies between secret identities and the actual hero in a lot of earlier comic books. Even Clark Kent in his earlier iterations, there wasn't a lot of distinction between him and Superman.
Okay.
Hmm.
Here, you have Bruce Wayne who seems world weary. He goes, "Oh, ho hum, this murder is very boring. I'm going to go home." Like, really playing up, there's no way that this privileged playboy is going to be this dark vigilante. And I thought that was a great characterization. Um, to me, I think that was the apex of what makes Batman and his secret identity so compelling. The worst thing that ever happens for Batman writers is when they make Bruce Wayne and Batman indistinguishable. It's always
Mm.
great to have Bruce Wayne as the facade where he's playing a rich upper crust person and playing it to a T.
I got to point out though, Adam, in the first Superman story, Clark Kent was very meek and timid. He purposely avoided a confrontation with those goons when they asked Lois to dance, remember? And
I,
he
it's striking a chord now that you're bringing it
yeah.
up.
So I think that the Clark Kent difference was played out right from the beginning. However, I do agree that in most Batman adaptations, Bruce Wayne is not done this way.
Mhm.
And they did it a little bit in Batman Begins, but not to the extent I think they could have, right?
Yeah, in Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, they did a little bit more than some of the other adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
Like they definitely show him partying and
Right.
like buying the restaurant or the bar, or
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like he does a lot
And
of
partying
that.
with the girls, yeah.
Yeah, so he does some of those things. So at least the people in his life, I think, wouldn't put the two and two together. But a lot of the other iterations, the line is blurred.
Right.
Bruce Wayne is always kind of just brooding around in his home by
Mm-hmm.
himself.
Yep.
I think that's the largest flaw in the Robert Pattinson Batman as well.
Yes.
He like
Mhm.
you take one look at that guy and you're like, oh, that's Batman.
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
got to be him, right?
And I love I in a way love that movie, and I love Robert Pattinson as Batman, but
Yeah,
what were they thinking with that? You're right.
yeah.
I agree.
But this was really fun. For this being the first appearance of a character, especially somebody as big as Batman, this was fantastic. I thought a lot of these old stories are pretty dry, especially when they are trying to do something with a little bit more of a serious tone, or like not, and I don't mean like dark serious, but like this is like an actual case that he's solving, right? Like a real
Yes.
murder has happened. And I think with a lot of other characters, this could have been kind of goofy and played out, and even just being 6 pages might have been a lot to read and kind of get through. This
Mhm.
was really fun. Very easy to read. I want to read more of this.
Mhm.
I think this style with a full comic would be great, because I think we could really see the mystery of what's going on, because in the 6 pages it's definitely hard to kind of have a twist,
Mhm.
and it's kind of like masked with uh Bruce Wayne and Batman, and I think it's done in a good way, not giving the audience all of the details
Mhm.
and then revealing it at the end. That's really smart. It's these like twists never work when we know what's going on. So
Right.
it's yeah. There's a lot of stuff that really does work in this. And really though, what a great costume.
Mhm.
Besides Superman, a lot of the other ones really are crummy and unmemorable,
Mhm.
and most of their redesigns improve on the costume, and this is one where it's like this is unmistakably Batman.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think there's a narrative advantage to this one too, because you brought up some of the other Golden Age heroes that we've seen origin stories for, and it almost always comes with an itemized list of their abilities or their
right.
special gadgets and doodads, and it gets to the point of, oh, you're just telling me what accessories come with the action figure, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Here, you don't really know what Batman's deal is. You see
Mm-hmm.
that he's obviously adept at fighting, he's intelligent, but they don't spell out for you what he's capable of, what he has in terms of his crime fighting ability, his
Yeah.
goods. Neither do you really know what his motivation is. And so, to me, as a narrative, this is one of the more intriguing Golden Age origins or debuts because you really don't know who Batman is and what he's capable of. And I think that's what makes it intriguing to want to go back. What
Yeah.
exactly is the Batman? What is he capable of? What can he do? Why is a millionaire doing this? And
Mm-hmm.
it's not established, which was the smartest thing, even if it was not intended to catch on or they had no hopes for this to be the
Mm-hmm.
popularized character it became. What a great way to intrigue readers.
Yeah, he could
Yeah.
be half bat for all we know by the end of this comic, Like he
Well, yeah,
could,
or
you know what I
that
mean?
power.
Yeah, like he could have literal bat powers, right? So it's yeah, I think this is a really great fun story. And I can also see why this has been kind of repeated and redone throughout the years. Um Again with these origins, I think that this is a strong enough story where it being retold works in a modern era. So, like if they were to redo this today, they could make it work.
I was actually thinking as we were reading all these versions, like this would be great to do as an episode of an animated series.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Now we should say that Bill Finger, for the first 5 decades of Batman's existence, didn't get any credit for creating the character. But as most people know now, Bob Kane only came up with the name Batman, and he came up with a red costume with a guy with wings and a domino mask. It was Bill Finger who designed this entire costume, came up with the name Bruce Wayne, came up with, I believe, Commissioner Gordon, and then most of all the villains. So Bill Finger was definitely the co-creator. He wrote the story. He's one of the better writers of the Golden Age. That's why this story's good. I mean, we've read some Bill Finger stories with other characters on this podcast, and he's definitely one of the better writers. But I do have to point out, oops, just a minute, my camera turned off. I do have to point out this particular story was plagiarized from a story called Partners in Peril, featuring the Shadow from 1936. I've never read the story,
Interesting.
but basically it's the same plot. That's fine. He was a Shadow fan. I mean, the Batman is clearly influenced by the Shadow, so that's just something we have to note.
Which was referenced in the Grey Ghost episode of Batman the Animated Series itself.
What? Oh, the reference to Shadow?
Yeah, because the Grey Ghost, even his costume is like pretty much a replication of the Shadow. So that's actually a direct reference to that.
Interesting. Okay, well, there you go. So at least they're acknowledging it. Now, before we go on to the next book, I didn't realize my good mic is not plugged in. So can you edit this part out, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second here. I do this every week. Can you hear me on this mic now? Scratch. No?
Yeah, it was a little choppy for a second. You want to say something else?
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3 into this mic. Tap.
It's like popping.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, let's try. I mean, I'm not touching anything. Testing 1 2 3. Is it still popping?
Yeah.
Testing, okay. You know what? I'll just give up then. That's okay.
We had this issue before. I'm trying to remember why this happened.
I don't. It's okay. I'm just gonna make a note for you. 25. Okay. 25. Oops. Wait. 25. Edit out Mike's mic. Okay. So now I guess. Oh wait.
Yeah. Just wait. Can you also unplug your camera and plug it back in? Maybe.
Okay, hold on.
Because you're frozen there, or just turn it off and on again. Oh,
let's try that.
Now it's your.
Now it's my other camera, and now there we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, we should be good.
Whew. So now, as we said earlier, this story was redone several times. Now we're going to cut to the next version, which was in let's see, this was, Detective Comics number 387, and this is by Mike Friedrich and Bob Brown. And Josh, I believe you're going to tell us what happens in this one.
Well,
Or
I
are you
think
going to?
Adam.
Oh, Adam. Adam's going to tell us
Right.
what happens in this one. Yeah, basically, you're going to talk about the biggest differences in this one from the first one.
Or I can't remember what we had decided.
No, I think we said Adam. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, it's important to keep in mind this is 30 years basically since the debut of Batman, and what comes beholden to us is the 1960s, and Batmania is looming large, and of course the association of Batman being a campier, flashier character who is always accompanied by his trusty ward Robin. So that's really the iteration and the difference we see here. It's basically the same plot, but we throw in Robin and we throw in a lot of touchstones of the era. So I'm just going to do a very brief recap, just explaining the differences.
Sure.
Unlike the original comic, which starts solely with Batman on a rooftop, we now have Batman and Robin swinging through the cityscape of Gotham City as they investigate a murder. Again, very much like what happened last time. We have the case of an individual who has been killed, supposedly, by his own son. Now, Mike, I don't think you really touched upon this. The son in the original comic was kind of a neebish character, glasses, very nerdy, kind of a blonde Clark Kent. This character, he's a flower power hippie, rebel without a cause. He literally rides a motorcycle. In fact, he came in and discovered his father murdered on the floor after going out on a ride on his motorbike, and he came in. Part of the reason why Batman even disproves that this individual did not kill his father was because he came in with motorcycle gloves on his hand, and the murder weapon has no trace of motorcycle oil or any fibers that would be related to riding the motorcycle. So he would only have been able to touch it after the gloves were off. That doesn't disprove that he was culpable in the murder, but it raises Batman's suspicions. What's interesting is that despite this, Robin absolutely believes the son, whose name is Mel, is responsible for the murder. And there's an ongoing thread throughout the story where Batman and Robin are arguing. Robin keeps getting these red herrings, pointing towards the fact that Mel was actually responsible for the murder of his father. And Batman keeps going, well, quiet down there, chum. We have to consider this. That's my Batman voice, in case you couldn't tell. So after an investigation, briefly in the room where the murder took place, Batman lets the son go. And then there's a little bit of more conflict between Bruce Wayne and Robin within the Batcave. We see an argument as they go away in the actual Batmobile this time, not in a red Ratster. So, that's an improvement. I like that. And they go around interrogating other people who are associated with this person who was, again, like in the original story, basically an owner of a chemical processing facility. One of the partners is being questioned, and just like in the previous comic we saw, he is shot and murdered when Batman and Robin are done initially questioning him. They catch the silhouette of the person who shot him, and it looks like the perfect outline of Mel, which again furthers this sort of rupture between Batman and Robin. This thread continues on as they proceed to once again try to see other partners associated with this chemical association to see if there is a unifying culprit or someone underlying that could be responsible for these murders. Very similar scene happens. Someone comes in looking for Stryker. This person is hit in the back of the head by someone who looks like, again, Mel wearing a mask. Well, Stryker is there, and it looks like this person who is trying to find him is about to be murdered, but Batman and Robin burst through the door. They assault the assailants. Batman and Robin end up double teaming this person who looks like Mel in a very interesting way. Robin grabs his feet and Batman decks him. Only in the
teamwork.
60s. Yeah. Well, Robin, after knocking out the character, he takes off the mask and it reveals, wait, it's not Mel Lambert? Then who? Well, it turns out this is somebody else. It is a hired goon for, guess who? Stryker himself. Again, culpable for the murder. He wanted to set off this series of murders so he could own the shares of this chemical consortium. Before he has a chance to kill this person who is asking about it, Batman comes in, knocks the gun out of his hand, flips him over, and yes, the case of the chemical syndicate, it's over. They resolve the issue. It turns out, yes, of course, it was all a conspiracy to kill all the partners in the syndicate so one person could amass power. The guilty party is put away, and we see this really thoughtful shot of Mel on his motorcycle, seeing a headline. It's one of those newspaper stands. It was hard to tell at first because it's not really the image of a newspaper in one of those newspaper
Right.
receptacle stands. It just says, "Man confesses to double killing." That's the only text on it. It's a slow news day. But he goes on because another thread I forgot to mention is how anti-authoritarian Mel is. He is, like I said, flower power, rebel without a cause. He thinks Batman is just yet another cog in the machine trying to oppress the people. Man, he's really getting me down. But when he sees Batman caught this, he starts having other thoughts. He goes, and I quote, "But what I can't dig, isn't Batman part of the system too?" And there's this great double image of him and Robin both pondering both Robin's suppositions that Mel was guilty and Mel blaming Batman for being part of the system and authority. And they both think simultaneously, "I've got me some heavy thinking to do." And I forgot the best part about this. When Mel is trading some barbs with Batman initially during the opening sequence, he says, "You don't get it, old man.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get this rock and roll reference." And then Batman goes, "Yeah, like Janis Joplin." And as we all know, canonically, Batman hates rock and roll, so that can't be true. But yeah, that is the 1968, I want to say, reiteration, new version of the story.
Whew. Josh, what did you think of this one?
It was fun. I liked how they expanded on the story. I think Robin was a very popular character at the time and a regular in this book, so it makes sense, his addition. And if you're going to add him, it was nice that they didn't just have him tag along. They gave him a little part in the story. The message is a little flimsy and kind of like weirdly tacked on to the story, maybe, but I didn't mind it. It was fine. It was very similar to the first one. The art was great. Yeah, I really love this style. Maybe my favorite of them all that we've read. I really like this, but yeah, it was good.
Yeah, okay. When you say favorite of all, do you mean of this episode or of the whole podcast?
This episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I have to agree, I actually loved reading this issue. There's some things I can criticize about the actual writing, but the art, this is the Caped Crusader era, and a lot of people dismiss it because right after this is when Neil Adams came and Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams made Batman serious, but I would rather read this stuff. Now this style was sort of established by Carmine Infantino and Murphy Anderson in '64 when Batman got the yellow circle around his bat. But this is Bob Brown, who's an excellent artist in his own right. And this issue, it's the Adam West TV show come to life. Even though the Adam West TV show was based on this era, like the art's great. You like as you're flipping, actually like look at the the pages here, like the dynamic layout of these pages, like Batman and Robin leaping there on that page and. The Batarang smashing against. What is it smashing against there? I don't even know it on that page.
I believe it's against like a door frame, or is it a lead pipe? No, it's a light system, I believe. Yeah, because he's killing the lights so the shooter can't identify them. Yeah.
But even look at the top panel. Like the camera is underneath Batman as he runs over the camera, and then Robin's in the foreground. Like it's excellent. And then, do you mind just flipping through a couple more pages? Yeah, like.
That Batarang in the foreground being thrown is great, and then it clearly like describing that it's hitting the hand with the paper in it. Yeah, everything is
excellent storytelling, and also look at the blacks, like the way that the contrast of the black shadows, but the yellow light coming in, and it's just I love this era. And I'll tell you, I have read so many comics in the last few years, and I'm a little bit jaded about Silver Age Marvel, but I gotta say, reading this makes me want to read more Silver Age DC. So it's definitely on my agenda. Now, however, there's one panel we did not. I'm surprised no one mentioned. It's ridiculous. It's on original page 6. If you can flip back to that, Josh. Now, everyone is familiar with the Batman trope of Commissioner Gordon being in the middle of a conversation and Batman just disappears.
Right.
Can you zoom into this middle left panel here, Josh? He's in the middle of talking to Batman, and then he says, "Gone." I've worked with Batman for years, and I still can't get used to his mysteriousness. But we see Batman and Robin running away. There's no mystery. It's ridiculous, right? But I love it. I don't care. I love it. It's just so awesome. It's so innocent. Anyway.
But there's some depth to this too. I do agree with Josh. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit forced with like the big message at the end. But having this schism between Batman and Robin, even at this time, like this is where this is better than the 66 TV series, where you actually see discord, you see some characterization, you see the fact that there's a generational difference between Bruce Wayne and between Dick Grayson. So you have this idea where this is reflected maybe with the generational gap between Mel and his father potentially. It's ham-fisted, but it's effective. And I think as a young reader, maybe even someone who's not quite a teenager, but maybe preteen, getting into that and maybe starting to want to have some hyper-identification and questioning authority, this kind of ask those questions without trying to reinforce anything. And I think even just bringing up that murky territory of, well, I don't really trust authority, but, Batman like tried to save me, even though he's part of the system, but he's still technically outside of it. It raises some ambiguities in a way that I'm not accustomed to comics from this era doing. And again, like you said, it's not like the most nuanced, but I think it's very effective. Also, I actually wasn't sure what was going to happen with the character of Mel because of the outline and because of the discrepancies of his alibi. I was actually wondering in the end if he was going to be the one in a sort of double twist, I guess, that he actually did kill his father. The fact that a comic from this era can have me guessing that and have me questioning, I think is a testament to how well the storytelling's done in here. I don't need to talk about the art or the coloring because you already mentioned, I think it's the best of the art and the coloring through all the comics we're going to talk about today. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but it's definitely up there in terms of what we're talking about today. It's probably a strong number 2 for my favorite comic that we're going to be talking about.
Sure.
Real quick before we move on, I will say too, I think it's also a testament to the art that it looks so good even with the recoloring. With like the digitized cleaned up version of it.
Good point.
That it looks so like clean and crisp and everything feels very, it just feels right even without the
pulp
paper texture and everything. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Also, I've been thinking this for years, and I really think if they took this era of Batman and also Superman, and they put them in digest comics like Archie and put them at the supermarket where kids could see them, I think they would sell millions. I personally think any kid could read this and love it still today, but that's just me.
Yeah.
No one else agrees. Anyway.
I totally agree.
You got something too that you should write DC.
Yeah. There you go. They never thought of it, I'm sure. Anyway, okay, so now we're going to jump to the source of these reprints, which is, here's the cover, Detective Comics 627, which through an irregular monthly schedule, this is the how did this work? So this should be the 50th anniversary, but it's not. 600 was the 50th anniversary. This is the 600th appearance of Batman. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so here's a recreation of the cover. And, I love Norm Breyfogle, but this cover, I'm sorry, does not hold a candle to the original, in my opinion.
No.
The anatomy is wonky. It's trying too hard. I don't like the expressions on the guys' faces. I don't like the unnecessary added white lines. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, there's not much that is an improvement. Maybe the cape having a little bit more shape to it and making the bat logo.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's fine. It takes up the whole page where the other cover didn't.
Yeah.
Other than that, yeah, it's not much of an improvement. It's fine. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a fine homage, I guess.
It's okay. But
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, and we should point out that at this point in Bat history, Jim Aparo had just done, oh my gosh, like 100 issues of Brave and the Bold, like 30 issues of Outsiders. He had done a 30-issue run on Batman, or 40-issue run. And at this point, he had just unfortunately been demoted to Detective Comics because that was considered the secondary title. And so even though he was a respected, established veteran, Norm Breyfogle was considered the hot young artist. And so Jim Aparo and Marv Wolfman, they swapped over to Detective Comics. And so that's why they're at this, part of the schedule. But anyway, so now, Josh, you can tell us what's different with this one.
Yeah, so this one has a new character being introduced. This one starts off with a cab driver picks somebody up, and as they're kind of talking, the cab driver turns around and is talking to the guy in the back seat. When he looks forward, he sees this mysterious figure standing in the middle of the street, and he slams on his brakes, and this character who is dressed in like a green lab suit almost
Kind of,
looking
yeah.
thing.
Like a hazmat
Yeah,
suit
yeah,
almost.
yeah. And they have like a hazmat like helmet / mask with like this big tank backpack on and a hose coming out to a gun, and they shoot this gun at the cab and it starts to melt and disintegrate, and it's very graphic, like much more graphic I feel like than if this character had just shot point blank this character.
Right.
We see the character that was being driven around in the cab melting in the background as the cab driver is looking at their hand as some of this like plasma falls onto him, and his like fingers start to melt, and he begs for his life, and this character kind of just says that they did what they set out to do and leaves. So now this character's talking to the police, and this is where it kind of goes back into the story that we are more familiar with, that we have kind of been talking about already. So Batman is doing some detective work. He's talking to
the woman.
What's her name? I'm sure it says right
Yeah, Detective Hanrahan.
Hanrahan.
Doesn't roll off the tongue.
Hanrahan.
Hanrahan. She's
Hanrahan.
the replacement for Commissioner Gordon because he had a heart attack.
Gotcha.
For now.
So he kind of gets the same information from her about how this guy was like part of this Ace Chemicals, or it's not Ace Chemicals in this one, it's CLRS Chemicals. And he goes back and plays tennis for a little bit, I guess. And sorry, this is one of the co-owners of this chemical company. The detective goes and starts questioning them, and he kind of starts talking about how they had been getting into arguments after there was like a leak in the building, causing all of this dumping of chemical waste into the water, and how they were, I think, being fined for it. Then we cut over to this this event that's happening, where I guess it's kind of like a conference.
Like a press conference.
Yeah,
That's what it looks like.
And this figure again is kind of infiltrating. They melt one of the electricians that's working on the show into a pile of goo. They show up and they shoot this guy and his wife, and then she starts blasting people in the crowd. and Batman decides to head over to this event to see what's going on, and that's where he encounters this person, and they start battling. They end up getting away by burning a hole into the ground and jumping through, and then burning the wall behind them to kind of cover up the hole. So it turns out that these murders aren't random, of course, and the person was one of the other owners of this chemical plant, and the CLRS stands for their last names.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of now knows where to go to next by following up with some of the other bad guys. And we cut over to this mansion now. And we're introduced to this new character who is the daughter of one of these guys. And we find out that he has been disfigured and in an accident in one of these chemical plants. And it's very clear that she wants revenge. And she is the person behind this thing. I don't think that they're trying to hide it at this point. Even before this moment, they were talking about this mystery villain as a she. And then when she shows up in the same kind of angry expression and like more muscular build, it was pretty obvious. And we also see her go into what seems to be a secret laboratory at this point. And we, again, are kind of flash back to this accident that happens, and she's talking about how nobody really cared for him after the accident. Now she's going to get some revenge. So Batman finds out about this by doing some research with Alfred, and then we cut over to this last guy, and he's in his home, and I think the detective actually talks to him and says, "We're sending people over to protect you. Stay in your house." And that's where we see that this bad guy is breaking in, burning down the fences, taking out the security system. And she walks in just as Batman shows up to the place and realizes that she's there. And he walks in on this elaborate bad guy trap of like bringing this guy to the chemical lab where her father was injured and setting up this tank full of this acid with like what seems like a ladder that he's tied to, bridging across the tank with another tank over top of it that she's going to press a button that's going to drop down on top of him.
But also, I got to cut in and say,
sure, yeah,
the detail. These are the same chemicals you used in my father. Well, almost the same chemicals. I've strengthened them here a bit, just a bit. They're slightly more flammable, as far more corrosive. Anyway,
so why
that detail's so important. But anyway, go ahead, Josh.
Right, yeah. So Batman shows up and essentially just punches her and fights her, and then due to her own like gun blasting holes into the sky bridge, she falls through a hole and lands into the acid and succumbs to her injuries and dies.
But also, Batman takes a stand on morality, right? When she's like, "Would you do the same?"
No, I wouldn't.
Like, "No, I wouldn't, Priscilla. I wouldn't do the same."
Yeah, this one's not as strong. I don't know why they changed it so much. I also don't know why they made it so gruesome and graphic and had maybe at the time like the whole chemical plant trope was very like strong of like being so graphic and trying to make a new bad guy out of or not the origin but the first appearance. It doesn't work. Even the way that even down to like how she succumbs to her own like gun. How does she blasts a hole in the wall in the floor and then immediately walks into it? It's not like she trips.
Yeah.
It's not like she just like blasts the hole and then walks into it and falls.
Good point.
It's doesn't feel as thought out. Um, it doesn't even feel like a twist. Where the other ones, it's not like a mystery that we're trying to solve, but
Mm-hmm.
we're still at least trying to figure out what the information is. And in this one, the second we see the character, we're like, oh, it's her. You
You know,
know?
yeah, here's the thing. I don't think Marv Wolfman's a great writer. And when I started buying Batman, Jim Starlin was writing it, and then right away he left. And it was so frustrating because I felt like, it was never, Batman was never as good as it was under Jim Starlin. But the art is still so good. Like Jim Aparo's my favorite Batman artist. This is not peak Aparo, but it still gives it that vibe. And the thing is even though I don't think the mystery works and the story's not great, it almost feels like you're reading like an imitation of a good film noir or a hard-boiled detective story. It's like the 80s TV network TV version of a good detective story, and it's not great, but at least it feels like a detective story, so I can enjoy it. On that level, I can enjoy it more than the 60s one even. But the thing is then you have a stupid supervillain with a stupid costume, and it's like it just pulls it down into 80s tropes. And then, you mentioned the heavy-handed way they deal with the chemicals. I know that Marv Wolfman likes to inject his own politics into his stories, which is fine, but he's always a little bit too heavy-handed, I feel. And this is an example of that. So I'm with you. Like, the whole thing just feels forced and kind of weak.
Yeah, and you know what? If they added this new part of the story where the murderer is doing it for like vengeance for their father, and kind of having commentary on like waste pollution, I think that's great and can work. But it just feels weird that they had to add this new character and then also make it so unbelievably graphic and
Right.
like it's just it it doesn't it just feels like it doesn't fit the story.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I don't know, it's strange.
yeah.
I don't
Adam,
love it.
what do you think, Adam?
I'm gonna have a hot take. This is my favorite of all of them.
Ooh,
Oh,
okay, okay.
really?
So here's why. We're
Okay.
gonna see more environmental commentary in an upcoming story. This one was not about commentary about environmental waste. This wasn't a comment about anything else beyond what makes Batman Batman.
Mm.
Now, we actually have neglected to name the villainess, Pesticide.
Mm.
Okay.
Better than Spider-Side, I'll give it that.
Yeah, and she tells us many times in the story their name is Pesticide, right?
One of my least favorite parts of the entire book. I mean, yeah, that name is horrible, but the reason I think this works is because we see indiscriminate killing from her. Her motivation is similar to Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne wants justice, but he also wants revenge for that boy that was hurt years and years ago, young Bruce Wayne. He wants Batman to make it so there's never another Bruce Wayne again that has the same tragedy. This character is different because she is so blinded by her rage. She doesn't care about protecting people. The fact that she graphically murders people so much, I think, is effective to underscore that difference. Batman is about trying to protect people, trying to protect the innocents. She is not. She's only about trying to avenge this idea of who her father was. And in its own way, there's even implied she is being squandered away from a fortune as well because of her father's disfigurement and inability to run part of this chemical coalition. The other thing that I think makes this very effective, because you did mention there was a thing about chemical plants at this time. You have to figure this is like 91. So after the Burton Batman, which had a lot of chemical plant imagery, after the grotesque melting sequence in RoboCop,
Yeah.
like that's a huge evocation of this. And the reason I think the graphicness works is because when we have Hanaran actually like talk about how much she's vomiting and how grotesque this is, I think it gives a sense of gravity. Sometimes when you have a character who goes through routine situations of having so many villains do so many ridiculous, despicable things, I think an audience can grow a little bit inured to it. Oh, what's the big tragedy? It's just another victim in like this city where everyone gets mugged or shot. Seeing something so grotesque, I think, underscores, regardless of how flimsy the motivation of the villain is, there is a real threat. in a way where maybe other villains aren't posing as much a threat. I actually dislike the fact that she was a one and done villain because I
Mm.
think if she herself ended up being disfigured or there was something else that came from this, there could have been a greater line. Maybe even her abandoning the horrible pesticide name and the costume and becoming something else. And I even heard Marv Wolfman at one point wanted to do more with this character, but
Mm.
it was received poorly. And I understand why. You both have some criticisms over the book, and I understand. But again, I'm seeing it for some of the weaknesses, a compelling reason why Batman has to exist. Because of that final line at the end, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it the way you did. I think this reaffirms why Batman is important, why he doesn't kill, and sets up a clear difference between this Batman and the one we saw in 1939, where he said, scum like that deserve to die the way they did, drowning in acid.
Mm.
I think this is him saying, no, this is our Batman. This is who Batman is now. And he's not about that.
Mm. Good
And,
point. Good
and even
point.
the stupid thing about her falling through the hole, which at first reading, I was like, okay, that is kind of a dumb way to die. My thought then was, did she want to live? Was this a form of passive suicide?
Uh-huh.
So my argument is, reading this, I felt like it's giving me vibes of something that I couldn't quite get, and not in terms of overall quality. This is going to be blasphemous to hear this. In a weird tonal way, I kind of got Dave Gibbons Watchmen vibes, maybe with the coloration,
Okay.
maybe with the sort of deconstruction I'm sensing from Batman's character. We're getting a better sense of who he is through negation of who he's not compared to, again, this other villainess who's
Mhm.
created. It's not a perfect story, not by any stretch of the imagination. It's not the most fun story, but it's the one I think that did the most for me to actually get me thinking about it
Mm.
and made me think, despite the stupid name, maybe this character had something where she could have reappeared and done something more. And I would actually love someone to revisit this version of the story and do something better with it.
Interesting. Interesting.
I think it could have been done better if the character was established a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I also see what you're saying with kind of showing the gruesome side and what Batman could have been, but I also feel like I think for me it was just too much. Like even like her going and just blasting random civilians just for fun in the like during the conference, like the electrician, and then she goes and she kills this guy and then his wife, and then she just turns around and starts offing people in the audience that are just like standing there. Like I I just feel like it almost like I don't know.
Wow.
It doesn't feel like she's
Gratuitous?
getting revenge from
Right.
for what's happened to her father at this point. She's just kind of on this like murder spree,
Well,
but
I mean, whether
yeah.
or not her motivation or whether the way she expresses it is logical is another question, but I still think her motivation is for revenge. But yeah, it's a little bit like, yeah, I know what you mean. Not to say that she's shooting her. It's almost like she's, I don't know. I'm mixing my metaphors. I'm not even going to finish my thought. The point is that I feel like, you mentioned earlier, Adam, about how when they introduced the Golden Age characters, it's like you're introducing an action figure, and that's what I felt like she was. It was like ready to go action figure. Not a great, like not a terrible villain, but doesn't really fit with Batman in my opinion. And I guess there's a reason why we never saw her again.
I would love, because of the contrast she has with Bruce Wayne, they're both people who are affluent, both had tragedies happen in their life, both decided to become vigilantes to pursue their individual goals. My whole thing is I would love to see this redone, and not in a one and done. Make it a multi-part arc where you actually have character development. You show and you underscore more of the similarities between Bruce Wayne and this character to show what Batman could be compared to
Sure.
what he is, and really show why he is so virtuous and such a great endearing character. Now, like I said, I don't think this is a perfect story. I think it's full of flaws. And for that, I think I love it more for the potential it has and more for the subtext I see. The other thing is when I brought up the Dave Gibbons thing, it's the coloration. It's a lot of the art. To me, as much as I love the dynamicism of that 60s comic, this one for me, maybe the art just won me over. I just really like that aspect of it so much.
Yeah, well, as I said, Jim Aparo is my favorite Batman artist. He's just so dynamic, and in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s, he was even better. But yeah, this is classic Batman to me. Really quick, Josh, what did you think of the art? This one?
Yeah, the art is great. Everything was really clear as to what's happening. I think that this character, again, I feel like I always compliment when a female character, like a woman, looks like a character in
Sure.
comics, because a lot of times they just kind of have the same Wonder Woman-esque
build.
face,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then they will just like recolor their hair or something, and
Sure,
will
sure.
say that this is a different person. Like, this looks like a real character, and I really love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff in this.
Mhm.
And like Adam was saying, the coloring is fantastic. I
Mhm.
do love like this sickly like pink and purple used to
Mhm.
kind of describe some of these parts in the
Mhm.
story, like this flashback, and how like
Mhm.
she is remembering it almost, right? Because this isn't his memory. This is like how she's kind of recalling these events
Mhm.
from what she's been told, and then having her weapon be the same like sickly purpley pink color. It's great. Yeah, the art is very good.
So in this, like we said, in this issue of Detective 627, they did the same story 2 different times by 2 different teams. Now we're going to talk about the next one, which was by the regular writer and artist on Batman, which was Alan Grant, who's British, and Norm Breyfogle, who's American. And so this is also called The Case of the Chemical Syndicate. And basically, to call attention to the differences, we open up with a guy, looks like a homeless person, kind of walking down the street. He's drinking, like he's trying to get like a last drip out of a bottle of alcohol, and he gives up. And then he comes to the sign for Gotham, welcome to Gotham. And then we cut over to a guy who is, what is he doing here? Is he stealing something from the bottom of this truck? I don't remember.
Yeah, he's like trying to siphon something off
Mhm.
from the bottom of this truck. Also, all the Easter eggs, it's Kane trucking for the
Yes.
truck. It's Aparo lane in the or Aparo advertising in the opening shot. Like, this issue is full of Easter eggs, just as a heads
Yeah,
up.
even on page 1, Ernie Chan, I think, Austin, what's the anchor's name? Terry Austin, Marshall Rogers. Yeah, every page has something. But anyway, so then we, Batman hears the alarm go off that the security guard sets off. Commissioner Gordon is called in. Now, we should point out, in continuity at this time, Commissioner Gordon had a heart attack, but for some reason in this story he's okay. Who cares, right? That's why I don't care about continuity. So Commissioner Gordon follows the alarm. He goes to the scene of the crime. Then we cut back over to the homeless person who's, I don't know if he's narrating the story. I think he is, right?
Mhm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so a car drives by and throws something at him. It's a can of pop, throws it at him, and then keeps going. Batman comes in, and this is where the story now becomes more like the original, where they come across the dead body, the knife in the back, the son, explaining why he's innocent. Batman uses his detective skills. We get some very stylized, exaggerated art where Batman is trying to intimidate the guy, and then basically, and then Batman actually grabs a package of cocaine. I'm actually surprised they got this in detail in 1991, but whatever. It was a different
I'm
time.
surprised Batman tasted the cocaine.
Yeah, I know,
Mhm.
right? It's the good stuff. Yeah. So he puts on his tongue. It's like cocaine. And then the guy, this is where it becomes a little bit melodramatic, but that's okay. Then the guy pulls out a gun and aims it at Batman. And then Batman does the old throw coke in his eyes trick, right? That old chestnut, and then punches him in the face, knocks him out. Then they arrest him. They take him away. And then this is where I love this, where Batman's always one step ahead of the game. And he says to Commissioner Gordon that he thinks this guy's innocent. And then he's like, the guy's like, "Are you sure he didn't kill the old man?" And he's like, "Your forensic team will bear me out." So then Batman leaves the scene, and then we cut back over to the old man, and then he's now talking to the cops, and this guy's complaining about wait. I don't even remember how this ties in. Do you remember? Does this kind of tie in?
It only at the end, and I don't know if it's a continuation or if it's just commentary on chemicals and how it affects everybody. I don't know why they chose
this guy,
like a homeless person. I feel like it. Maybe I don't like. Maybe this was something.
Oh, I think I know what this is referencing, but I'll talk about it once we get the recap. Yeah,
sure, yeah.
So then we basically cut back into the main story, where now we cut over to, again, it's paralleling the original story, where now we touch base with Professor Lampert. Somebody comes to the door, his butler opens it up, and these two goons come in. They actually shoot him and kill him. Batman sees it happen. He's got this big shocked look on his face. Then as the guys are going through the safe to get the papers out, Batman comes smashing through the window, which we'll talk more about that later. But this is unusual. He actually points the gun right in the other goon's face.
Crazy.
And is like threatening him with a gun. Like he's got it up against his chin. And then the guy confesses. He's like, a guy hired us. He said to make it look like a robbery. Who? I don't know. We never saw him. He called us at a bar, said he had a job, dropped off half the cash. His name, I don't know. His name. And then the guy, look at this. He actually puts the gun
in his mouth.
But it's distracting because it says Grell on it, like Mike-EL. Like, come on, that's distracting. But anyway, so then Batman updates Commissioner Gordon on what's going on. Batman leaves, and then we cut over to the other partners who are now at this chemical plant. Again, it's kind of paralleling the other story. This guy has got a gun to Paul's face, and he's telling him to sign a confession that he's the one that killed these guys, right? And the guy signs the confession, but then we cut back out to the homeless guy who's walking along, and then the guy gets harassed by some hooligans. Batman comes in, beats them up. And then we cut back over to Commissioner Gordon and another cop going into the chemical plant. And we see that the guy from the earlier scene that had signed the confession has now hung himself, and he's hanging over like the vat of chemicals. Commissioner Gordon reads the thing. Batman comes in. And then Batman's like, wait a minute. He starts shouting out the name of the other guy, Stryker. He's like, your dirty secret's out. And he's like, I know you're still here. I was at the rear of the building. So he basically knows he's still in. So then the guy starts firing at Batman and Commissioner Gordon. Batman pushes him down. He throws a batarang. The guy jumps over like one of the railings, and then crashes into a vat of acid. And then Batman gives this famous line again, a fitting end for his kind. Then in the next panel, a very obvious tribute to the original Batman design. All of a sudden, it's like his mask just changes, right?
It's like it's an Animorph.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so then, and this is where they start. This is where Batman starts explaining everything that happened and how everything worked out. And then basically, Commissioner Gordon's like, so I checked GC Chem. Those papers they dropped were waste disposal contracts, all with Stryker. And on my way back here, I heard a story. Now this is where the homeless guy comes in, right?
Yeah.
And he talks about how, that's right. He talks about how what ends up happening here. He's with all of his guys, and they were talking about doing something. There was something in the water. Help me out here.
His friends started digging at the earth to try to extract some water that they were cooking with, and then all of a sudden, all this toxic waste comes bubbling up and ends up killing his friends. They all kind of disintegrate in the end, and that's how he wanted to come to Gotham to say something was wrong with my buddy, something was wrong with my friends. This happened.
Right.
And that's the end of the story.
And I guess it's kind of like he didn't have no one took him seriously. He didn't have a voice. He didn't get to tell his story. And so now Batman knows the story, right? That's the end. I'm just going to say, the whole time, like when I got into Batman, Alan Grant and Norm Breyfogle were doing Detective, and it's a very popular run, but it never clicked with me. I never loved Alan Grant, and I did not like Norm Breyfogle's art. I think he's kind of like an image artist where he has a lot of potential. He's a lot of style, but his anatomy is so sloppy. and some of it is because it looks rushed, and some of it just looks bad, which I can talk more in detail about later. But I do admit that this story was slightly better than I thought it would be, and I've never had the motivation to go back and reread these issues, but now I'll probably reread them all. That's my take on this issue. Josh, what do you think?
I really did like this one a lot. I think maybe my second favorite of the bunch
Okay.
that we've read. Specifically the art. I do get what you're saying. It is very messy at times, but I think that I just really love the artistic direction that they go with a lot of the times. And with like how much they push Batman when he's being scary. Like this panel here is
Sure.
like it doesn't change, like it's not like he's transforming into something else, but the
Yeah.
way that he is drawn is so pushed, and it's so exaggerated that it almost shows you like what this person is imagining, right?
Yeah,
Like
psychological.
it's like so dynamic and so pushed. This like shadowed face, and his
Mhm.
eyes are like no pupil in the eyes, which this costume doesn't have, but it's just like it makes him almost inhuman. It's so great. Him flying into the window here, and it's like the perfect bat symbol. Like there's just so
Mhm.
many moments like that.
However, go
Um,
to the next page now.
this one here or the one
The
before?
next, right there.
Oh yeah,
I just don't think that's a great splash page, you know?
yeah, it's fine.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
know what he was going for, but I just don't love it. Like Batman's head barely looks attached to his body. You
yeah.
know, I don't know. I mean, I think I like it slightly more than I did as a kid. Like,
Hmm.
I appreciate the harshness of the lines. It's almost like a little bit like Frank Miller or Bill Sienkiewicz would do. I just don't think it's as good. Like, I just wish he would have developed more as an
That's
artist.
fair.
But I do like it more than I did as a kid. I'll put it that way.
I just love
That.
this, like like the little Batman in the background, and then the shadow growing as it comes. Like I
Mhm.
really enjoyed the art in this one with these like little details, and there's just
Sure.
so much to look at, and it really tells the story by itself, even without the dialogue.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, Adam, what'd you think?
I didn't care for it. So I'm actually the
Okay.
opposite. I think me and Josh are polar opposites today. I'm going to say this. I appreciate what it was trying to do. The art, I'm in Mike's camp because the whole time I was reading this, I felt it was very McFarlane-esque and not necessarily in a good way. My criticism of McFarlane has always been he's went for more dynamicism than actual like good compositions in his art,
Mhm.
and I'm getting that here. I do feel Batman's form transforms repeatedly throughout this in
Mm.
ways that I didn't really care for. I thought the coloring was better than the inking and then the pencils. I'll say
Mhm.
that. In terms of the dialogue, I thought the script was probably, in terms of all the scripts, it was probably the best in terms of the prose. So I will give this
Mm.
comic that. But I don't feel it did anything new. I think that's why I have a soft spot for the previous issue we talked about because, yeah, it wasn't just like, oh, let's do a modern version of the first debut of Batman. Let's do something a little bit different. This didn't really do anything different. It was still basically the same mystery, but there was kind of a hackneyed environmental message thrown in there and a hackneyed message about how people don't pay attention to the impoverished and don't pay attention to those who are brushed to the edges of society, which normally I'm all about those social messages, but it seemed so ham fisted here.
Mhm.
And I did want to say how the homeless person who was going from the outskirts of the dump into the city was a reference to something, or at least I believe it is. I believe this is a reference to a Swamp Thing comic. Back in
Mm.
1985, there was a two-part comic involving a homeless character named Nuke Face, who was basically a character who
Ah,
was a homeless
one.
person who drank
Hmm.
toxic waste and basically disintegrated anything he touched, kind of like a cursed King Midas.
Mm.
And
Mm.
this character's design looks a lot like him. He comes from a place that's inhabited by toxic waste. We don't see him touch anything. And just like the character of Nuke Face, he travels from place to place and doesn't really do much, but he's just kind of a walking social commentary about the horrors of toxic waste and environmental disrepair.
Hmm.
So to me, I think that was a clear reference to that character. Only when I see that, I think, wow, those issues of Swamp Thing were so great, and I'm reading this instead. And that's always the thing. You might have to beat this out, but don't remind me of a better comic in your shitty comic. Not that this is
Yeah.
a shitty comic,
Mm.
but don't remind me of a
Mhm.
better comic when I'm reading this one. Um, the mood, I think, was good. I will say, I think of all the comics, the mood was the darkest and was very consistent in that
Mhm.
tone. But between the art, between the fact that I don't think it really did anything new, yeah, it's probably my least favorite. The homeless character was probably the biggest thing for me, going, aha, it's probably a Swamp Thing reference, but that's it. And also, pet peeve, I hate when comics do this. All the Easter eggs. There's Finger Avenue.
Yeah.
There's
I hate
like
that.
Adam's Lane. It's like, I get it. I get it. These are people who worked on Batman. I'm not dumb. I get it.
And you know, I can forgive it if it's done once or twice in the background, but this
Right.
was just
It's a
so
lot.
distracting. Yeah. I really don't know what to think because Alan Grant is British. So as you said, Adam, his prose is the best. Like he's probably the best, writer, but and the mood is great and it fits Batman and actually he established himself on Judge Dredd. So he's the perfect guy to be doing Batman. It's the most serious of the bunch, whereas Marv Wolfman's is more of like a little bit more of a standard superhero comic. But yeah, I'm really on the fence about it. I think I'd have to go back and reread more of these to kind of like get an angle about how I feel about it. But I do gotta say, as I was looking at these pages again, I really appreciate the fact that when Batman shouts out, I know you're here. I love that moment because Batman should always be one step ahead of everybody else, right? So that was one of my favorite moments, and there's probably other ones I forgot about, but I really appreciate that.
I do want to pull up one little plot point, though,
Sure.
which did bother me, and I'm glad you remind me of it. So he said, I saw him come through the back, so I know he's here. So you just waited for how long for him to make this guy write his confession and then murder him?
Good
Instead
point.
of following the
Good point.
guy that you suspected was the murderer.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So it's not perfect. Let's say that it's not
Yeah.
perfect, right?
And full respect, Josh, I get why you like this. I think your points are valid. The art's not to my taste, but I do see the merits you're talking about. Just for me, I just felt, as per my taste, it was the weakest in this collection.
That's totally fair because I it's the same with McFarlane too. There's a lot of issues where his art does not work, but I still find it just so interesting and entertaining to look at. Like I just really appreciate the experimental side of it and kind of pushing how far you can kind of take the comic, especially because it is this like it's a drawing, so you can do whatever you want. You can make it as fantastical as you can. So those I don't know, I just really appreciate those moments where the characters can be kind of pushed to their limits a little bit. So yeah, but I think you're right. The story is not necessarily the strongest. I don't know. I just enjoyed this one a lot.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is sometimes with these writers, like say someone who does like the Punisher, like Mike Baron, I feel like the mood is always right, but the writing is not spectacular. But sometimes if the art is just right and the mood is just right, you can kind of enjoy it just to get that your fill. It's like, oh, I want my Batman fill. Even though the story's not great, it still gives you your Batman what's the word I'm looking for?
Jollies?
Yeah, your Batman jollies. Yeah. So
trademark pending.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Alan Grant, like I said, did Judge Dredd. He actually wrote Batman for like 10 years. He did Detective, then he did Batman, then he did Shadow of the Bat, as well as other books. So yeah, he has a very long history with Batman. So there's a lot more Alan Grant to read if you're interested. But anyway, so that was 1991, we said. Now, I should point out, this story was redone an additional time that we're not going to review. It was done in Secret Origins #6, which was a retelling of the Earth 2 Batman origin, as well as the case of the Chemical Syndicate. And Josh, I don't know if you have the. Do you have two of the pages loaded in there or no? Or do you have for later?
I've got them here.
We can wait. Okay.
No,
okay.
I could just. You won't be able to see them, but the audience sees them right now.
Oh, good. So you're showing, what are you showing now? The cover.
The cover here, yeah.
Yeah. So this is when Secret Wars. This is when Secret Origins started doing 2 stories in each issue. This is Halo and Batman. But it's a great issue by Roy Thomas. I'm not a huge Roy Thomas fan, but this issue is good. The art is by Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin, who were famous for doing the detective run in the mid-'70s. That's some people consider the definitive Batman. So this is definitely worth digging up. If you get a chance to read the story, it's really good. And then you have like one of the pages there, right?
Yeah, I just pulled the page up now. Yeah, it's great.
It's an example of Marshall Rogers' art. Like, he is a really good artist and also highly influential on Todd McFarlane. So I don't know if you've come across Marshall Rogers before, but yeah, you can see a little bit of McFarlane in there. So it's pretty interesting if you get a chance to pick it up. But we did not read that one, but we did read one more version of this story, and it was in Detective Comics Volume 2, number 27. And this one is written by Brad Meltzer, who is probably most famous for doing, what was it called? Identity Crisis. And it's drawn by Bryan Hitch, who is famous for being the best freaking superhero artist of the past 20 years. But some people don't seem to realize that, and it pisses me off. But anyway, he's awesome. And he became famous by doing The Authority. And then he did The Ultimates and basically kind of, made modern Marvel what it is, in my opinion, which led to the Marvel Cinematic Universe and blah, blah, blah. He's the one that cast Nick Fury as a Samuel L. Jackson lookalike, and then luckily they cast Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. So anyway, he drew this story, and I believe, Josh, you're going to tell us how this one plays out, right?
Yeah. This one plays out similarly. We kind of get it through more of a montage, kind of. Like, it goes by so quickly. We are already getting Commissioner Gordon kind of here in the car, right? Investigating what's going on during this like big party that's happening. And Batman is talking to Alfred as they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they cut right to Stephen Crane's house, and these two guys have already killed him, and they're going through the safe, and Batman shows up and beats them up and gets the information. So he heads over to Ace Chemicals to try and suss out what's going on. And that's when Stryker hits Alan over the head. Alan, right?
I think so.
Whoever this one is.
What's nuts? Yeah.
Yeah. Hits him over the head, and just like in the first issue, he actually puts him in this like chemical machine, this like big tank. So instead of it being like a glass balaclava, that kind of falls over him, it's this big like experimental tank, and he closes the safe door on it. And that's when Batman bursts through the skylight in this fantastic looking splash page. Really cool. And he dives right into this chamber, and this bad guy locks him in there. Batman gives him like a breathing apparatus as he starts smashing through the glass, and he almost doesn't make it, but again, he smashes through just fine. He hits him with a batarang, and then Commissioner Gordon shows up to arrest this guy. And then similarly to the first issue, he does end up like surviving or almost getting away, and he pulls a gun on Commissioner Gordon, and Bruce Wayne runs and kicks him in the face. He falls over the railing into the vat of acid here, and the only kind of difference I think in this one is we actually see a hand splash out and grab the edge of the tank here, and And it's interesting. I wonder if in this version of Batman is supposed to be a Joker origin. Is that
I
something?
mean, I
Because
don't think
this is
so.
like a separate Batman, right? Like this is a different universe, like a new.
Well, it's part of the New 52.
Right.
And Joker's already established, so I think instead there is a character that this sets up as the origin for. I
Okay.
really fell off the wagon on New 52, so I have trouble
Right.
recalling a lot of the characters they come up with.
Wow, guess what? 1 point for Josh because the character's name is Alfred Stryker, but in the entry for this character, they say that he might possibly be the Joker.
Oh,
So I think it is, but I don't know. I don't think they ever went back to it, so they kind of just left it ambiguous.
Right.
Joker's clarified everything, so
Wow.
I think that it's supposed to be more of like a hint that maybe their origins were tied from the beginning, because we don't ever really see the origin of Joker throughout comics history. We do in like the Batman Tim Burton movie specifically, and I feel like whenever people think about the Joker and how the Joker started, it's connected to that that version and seeing him fall into the vat of acid. And this version of the story, I didn't feel that this way with any of the other ones, but this one in particular did kind of feel like maybe it was.
Well, no, he did.
Connected.
He fell into a vat of acid in the comics, like in the 30s.
But we don't know who he is, or
no, we
like,
don't know his name. We
okay,
yeah. So yeah, you're right. They've tied together Joker's origin with with this guy's demise, basically. Yeah, and it's actually a cool idea because it makes the first Batman story possibly the origin for Joker. Yeah,
and they even like give him like the kind of like widow's peak and the long face and the bright green eyes. I think they even talk. So I think one of the detectives even like makes a comment on him, but or comment about him. And then another thing too that I noticed about this version, it really does look like Christian. He does look like Christian Bale, right?
100%,
like Bruce Wayne.
Yes.
I had to double check that we weren't reading a like Dark Knight tie-in comic or something, because when I first saw it, I was like, that's Christian Bale, right? Like it's so unmistakably him.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's gotta be Val Kilmer, if anything.
Yeah.
No, I noticed that too.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is first I'll say Bryan Hitch is one of my favorite artists, but I actually thought the cowl was a little bit too much like Christian Bale, and which I actually hate Christian Bale's costume. So I think that was a weakness in the story. But I do appreciate what Bryan Hitch is doing. Like he's trying to make these characters look as realistic as possible. So that's fine. You know, I can accept that. But for the most part, the art was really good. A few parts looked a little bit rushed, but overall, I love his art, so I'm not going to complain. As far as the writing, Brad Meltzer, I have mixed feelings about. But the one really distracting, irritating thing about this issue was, why do I do this? I do it because I'm good at it. Oh, shut up. I'm so tired of that. Like, to me, it's all just fifth-rate Alan Moore, and we've been seeing it since the mid-'80s, and it just drives me up the wall, and I'm just so tired of it. The actual story itself is fine. Most of the writing is okay, but that little trope drove me crazy. It's also a little bit short. It feels like it could have been a few pages longer, but overall, it's really hard to place the story because it feels like it's brand new to me, but I just looked at the cover. It came out 10 years ago. And it feels like I honestly, in my brain, this is a new issue. So that's how fast time is going for me. But that's my take on this one. Adam, what did you think?
Full confession, I had to read this speed reading right before.
Okay,
I forgot this was one that we did, but I did go through it. And I think I'm actually going to follow through with a lot of comments you said, because it felt like there was no point to this. That was kind of a criticism I had over the last issue we had read, or the second story in that previous issue. It's magnified here. At least that tried to do a different frame of narrative for who is reciting it. They threw in a little bit of social commentary. Here it is just, here's a modern Batman doing the same thing, Easter egg where this guy is kind of the Joker. And I will admit, like, that tie-in is probably the neatest part of it. But even then, I'm one of those people who hate having a Joker origin. I'd rather the character's roots be ambiguous.
Me too.
The closest thing I think I ever got to an official origin for Joker is, you brought up more, is something like The Killing Joke, where you have that great little epitaph where Joker says, "I remember my origin different all the time, so who knows if this
Mhm.
is my real story or not." Which I know is a cliche at this point for people to bring up about the Joker, but I think is the best part of that lack of origin. I like this as it's a possibility, but we're not outright saying that this is
Mm.
the Joker.
Mm.
It Again, it's just not really doing anything new. If you're presenting Batman in a different way, even with a different attitude or a different atmosphere, that would be something. But it's a gritty, dark Batman in a modern setting. Well, we just seen two more of those just previous to this, and I would say both those other iterations are better than this. Um, you know what? I think I misspoke because I said the previous issue was maybe my least favorite of the batch. It was my least favorite of that particular comic that we
Mm.
read. Of the batch, this is definitely my least favorite.
Interesting. And it's funny because again, this is the the double-edged sword of modern comics where you have writers that work in TV and you have writers that are novelists, but sometimes it's like they're trying too hard, or I don't know what the problem is, but they really irritate me sometimes. And I thought that some of the scenes in Identity Crisis were so well written, but overall, I mean, I hate the underpinnings of the story, but that's another podcast. But
Well, I'll admit it, I hate Identity Crisis. It's one of
okay,
my hated comics
yeah,
of all time.
I
But
can understand why. Yeah,
yeah, but if you ever want me to come onto a podcast where we talk about that, I'll clearly explain
sure.
why. But
But
no,
now, but let's
no.
put it this way. I kind of hate it too, but don't you? But you do you think that Brad Meltzer is a talented writer in any way, or?
I think I'll put it this way. I think he's capable of being a very talented writer. Have I read any comics or have I read anything
Okay.
of his that I thought was good? No.
Okay. Okay.
I'll
Fair.
go that far, and that's pretty harsh, I know, but I have just not read anything of his where I thought, walking away, "Oh, that was really good." I always thought,
Hmm.
"Oh, that could have been good, but this happened or that happened," and,
Yeah.
yeah, I think maybe best thing I've ever read from him was maybe I think it was a Batman Superman issue that they came out with. It was sometime in the mid 2010s, and it simply because it was the least worst thing I read from him. Meltzer fans, make sure that you flame me in the comments, please. But yeah.
So here's the thing. Okay, so as we know, time moves faster the older you get. This came out 10 years ago,
Mhm.
but that was even, what's that, 20, almost 25 years after the other issues we just read. So, Josh, in your opinion, since this came out when you were a baby, what is no, I tease, I
Just in the
tease.
womb.
Yeah, no, but like, what is your biggest takeaway from this Brad Meltzer and Brian Hitch issue as far as compared to the other ones?
It it feels unfinished. It's very
Mm,
short. It it feels more like an homage rather than a new origin. Um, I would have preferred that maybe it was a full issue and they could expand on it a little bit more.
mm-hmm.
See how it's different from the other Batman versions, because in this one it's only different really visually. Everything
Mm-hmm.
else kind of plays out exactly like the first one. Um, and it this definitely feels very film focused, like it influenced. Like
Sure.
it does really feel like that this is this version of Batman because it's going to sell, because everybody likes those Nolan movies and
Mm-hmm.
everybody
Mm-hmm.
wants more of the Nolan style. So like even
Mm-hmm.
the city itself, this like plant, this like chemical plant feels very like real-ish, real adjacent. Like this this vat is tiny. Look at
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a little kiddie pool.
That's a
And
good
it's
point.
just like a tiny little railing here. Like I don't know, nothing feels pushed enough in
Mhm.
this.
That's a good point because he's gone for realism, but he's sacrificed like poetry. I don't know, but like there's no art to it. It's just like, oh, here's the chemical plant down the street that I'm just gonna draw from. I'm gonna take a picture of it and copy it. But yeah, there's no drama to this, right?
Yeah.
And maybe from an ethical standpoint too, like, okay, we can talk about consumer ethics all we want to, but you are a comic fan. There's so much out there. You only have so much money to spend on an issue. Why would someone present you a remake of a story and they do nothing to it, just as a little wink and nod and homage, and there's nothing else to it? God, make this character who falls into the vat a new character. Make him a new villain, or do something. Maybe even have maybe the outcome of what happens after. Maybe Batman's being pursued as a vigilante for murder, and maybe because he's wrongfully seen as pushing this person into the vat, where in this iteration he didn't. Like, give me something. The kind of introduction of him and Jim Gordon maybe veer towards something new, but I've seen stories where Jim Gordon and Batman meet ad nauseum at this point. There's so many times that they've redone that meeting, and here it's just it's pretty. I'll give it that.
It's almost like I wish they would, in a way, stick closer to the original, because it's like either you're going to redo it or you're not, and it's like, okay, it's almost like treat the original story like draft one, and now just improve upon it, and like let's have that scene of them sitting together enjoying a drink and a smoke or whatever they're doing, and just but do it better, like do it more cinematic and do it more modern. But this is almost like too different, but not in a good way, not in an interesting way, more just like trying to be clever. And with it, like I said, the stupid narration that annoys me so much. But
it's awful. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, it's I just stopped reading it.
Yeah,
I just was like, I can't do this anymore.
I actually want both of your opinions on this, because I found it very distracting in the sequence where Batman was trying to extract the guy from the gas chamber, because it had the diary entries from Batman, but then it also had his internal monologue. So it was like I'm reading his internal dialogue twice in two different timestamps. Like, did you find that annoying, or am I just
it was garbage.
Yeah.
Like, he's fighting for his life. I do it because there's nothing more powerful than an ordinary person. First of all, that's bullshit. But second,
I do it because I can't go to the movies anymore.
Yeah.
Well, he literally says this.
You made that up. That's real? Oh my
That's
God.
real.
I can't see Inside Out 2. No.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. It's like parody. It's like self-parody. It's so bad.
Yeah.
And I feel bad because I know Brad Meltzer's capable of more, but it's like he's just taking himself way too seriously, I think. Anyway. And the thing is I defend modern comics, but this is the type of stuff that older readers like me don't like, because it's trying so hard to be serious and realistic.
Yeah. Right? And I don't mind if something is going to be dark and have like a serious tone, but it doesn't also feel like it has any character to it. Like the Tim Burton movies are pretty dark and serious, but there's so much like life in those movies. The city, like you can take a look at just a screenshot from those films, and it's like telling a whole story with the city and the environment and everything that's happening. This just feels bland and sterile. Like it's nothing special. Nothing makes me want to keep reading this. The art is technically good, but it's boring. I would rather read the last one, like another issue of the last one, and see interesting, weird art that is like pushing itself and the boundaries, and even if it fails half of the time, the success, like those panels that really work, is way more rewarding than I think anything that happens in this issue.
That's a good point, because usually I'm very critical of realistic art. I'm actually not a fan of Alex Ross for every reason you just described. There's no magic to Alex Ross. There's no imagination. There's no exaggeration. And I can see why you would apply that to Bryan Hitch as well. Although I actually think Bryan Hitch is a better artist. But when you compare it to Jim Aparo and Norm Breyfogle and even Bob Brown, Yeah, that's a comic book. Like if I want to see if I want to look at a photograph, I'll look at a photograph. But if I want to see Gotham City, I want to see a fictional fairy tale city, not just a rendered photograph of a real chemical plant, right? I want to see an exaggerated chemical plant. So I'll definitely give you that.
Mhm.
It actually makes me question why I like Bryan Hitch. But
And
anyway,
I think if the story was a bit better and felt
yeah,
grounded and I was interested, I think that the art would be fine. I think it's just the two of them married together in this story is just, I think, both dull. Like there's no reason
sure.
for it to be grounded. I don't know. It just
Well,
it wasn't
I
my favorite.
agree. It doesn't
Yeah.
carry a great story. That doesn't carry good dialogue. If that was married with it, it would be one thing. And you know what? I'm even going to say I've seen Hitch's stuff. I've seen it done better. I think he was probably going through the motions to some extent
Mhm.
because technically it's very sound. But yeah, there's probably that thing of, well, this isn't exciting. I'm just doing the same story four other artists have worked on. So,
Mhm.
well, I'll just go through it. Um, yeah, I will ask if we're ranking them, what's your preferred ranking of all
Ooh,
five of these stories?
oh my gosh. Like which one would I want to read more of?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Number 2 is definitely my favorite.
Mhm.
I
Um
think the art is my favorite in the Bob Brown one. Yeah,
yeah.
the second one. Yeah.
I think even the story. I think that the story and the art together are my favorite. Like they really do feel like they complement each other. It's one that I can see myself reading like a whole run of.
Mhm.
Even like my second favorite one, the last one that we did, I don't know if I would finish a whole run of it, but I'm so intrigued and I want to see more of it and kind of the directions that they can go. After that, maybe the first issue. It's very classic, and then maybe the middle one, and then this one.
Mhm.
I don't know if I could rank them all. I don't know. I'll say I think the least exciting might be this one, and then I like the '60s one, and then I like the '60s one probably the most. Maybe the Norm Breyfogle one next, then the Marv Wolfman one. It's hard to rank the original because it's so primitive, but
Right.
I did like it. But yeah, it's hard to. They all have things about them I like and things I don't like, so it's kind of hard. But the interesting thing is, and this is why, to be honest, I think that it's so interesting is that the plot is roughly the same. So it's hard to compare a different story or different art on on a completely different story. But here we have roughly the same story, done by 5 different writers and 5 different artists. So it's cool to compare not just Batman, but how comics have evolved, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's funny because objectively, Brad Meltzer and Bryan Hitch should be the best ones, but they don't click in a way. I don't know. It's interesting. But people make fun of the '60s stuff and they dismiss it as kid stuff, but we all loved it so much, right?
Yeah.
Even if it
So
wasn't my favorite, it was right up there. I think it would be my
yeah.
second favorite of everything we read. And honestly, I'm going to say this going back to the very first issue we talked about, 1939. It's iconic for a reason. I think it
Hmm.
encapsulates everything that's really good about Batman. And, at the same time, this is a really great course through history showing how Batman has changed tonally, how his ethos has changed from being someone who didn't mind having his adversaries killed to someone who's actively trying to save those
Mm.
that he's fighting
Hmm.
against. I think what's really interesting through this is seeing what's changed over the years and what's remained consistent. And I do think there is a very hard to define core characteristic of Batman, his selflessness, this sort of dark insularness that's remained throughout all these different permutations of him, which is what made him so endearing. Um, this is very good. I would love to do the actual origin issue of Batman that comes, I believe, a few years later, actually, where they talk about the origin. But who knows if I'll be invited to that one or if you'll do it. But
Oh, we already did it. I'm sorry. We did it on episode 3 of Slam.
spoilers: his parents were killed. Just for those who don't know.
No, but anyway, no, actually, it was episode 3. Sorry, it was
He was a
episode 7.
few in, yeah.
But we did do the origin, and sorry you weren't on that one, Adam. But
It's okay. I think I know why he became Batman at this point.
Okay. But no, but you know what's funny is this. I think my general summary of modern writers and artists is that they technically might have more, like they're technically better writers and technically better artists, but they're just getting a paycheck. They're just dashing it off. Whereas the older writers and artists, maybe they weren't as technically good, but they're putting their heart and soul into it, and that's the difference. Like even though, right, like Marv Wolfman took the time to think about the parallel between Pesticide and Batman, right? And then in the Bob Brown book, they took the time to let's develop Robin's character a little bit more and make him disagree with Bruce Wayne, right? So again, they're not technically, it's just like why punk is so great. They're not technically great musicians, but they're pouring their heart and soul into, you know, the art that they're creating. And I think that's why classic comics still hold up.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well said.
So yeah, there you go. Yeah, Batman, the case of the chemical syndicate, told 5 different times. We recommend you know, try to read these yourself because it's a great way to see how the character has evolved over the years. We want to thank Adam-Antium for joining us. Hopefully you can join us next week because we are closing in on the Golden Age and we're almost at the end of introducing the major characters from DC. But there's one more to go before we close out on the Golden Age, and that's Black Canary. So Black Canary, if you don't know, has the most effed up history of maybe any DC character, and you will see when we get to Black Canary 2 how that plays out. Yeah, anyway, we'll leave it at that, but be sure to join us next week for Slam. Also be sure to join us on Taped Crusaders, where in the next few upcoming episodes we'll be covering such fun movies as, oh boy, what is it? Can you help me, Josh? Do you remember?
Well, we're going to be talking about The Crow soon.
Yeah, actually that's out of order, so that'll be in about 7 episodes. But
anyway. we're
anyway.
also recording a few episodes ahead, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So by the time this comes out, it should be around there. What did we just do? Dick Tracy.
Yeah, we're gonna be doing Captain America, Darkman, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So be sure
Have
to
you done Meteor Man yet?
Meteor Man is not slated, but maybe we'll add it in. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so that's it. And Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, you can also find all of our stuff over on our website at comicbooksyndicate.com. All of our podcasts are video formats. They're also on YouTube. Let us know what you guys think about the podcast, the things we're talking about. Leave us a comment, leave us a like, and keep in touch.
That's right.
Yeah.
And until the next time, see you later.
See ya.